Hello and welcome back to WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm George Upper, editor-in-chief of the Western Journal, and we'd like to invite you, if you're watching us on YouTube today, to make sure that you click that subscribe button and the bell next to it so you're notified every time a new episode of WJ Live comes on air. You don't want to miss any of those. Today is going to be a great show. We're going to talk about two responses to Democrat politics on either side of the nation. So first of all, we have some Americans who are once again looking to secede as if it were 1860 all over again. Our own left coast correspondent for Western Journal and resident birthday boy, Cameron Arkand, is here to talk about that today. After that, we'll also talk about some Americans on the other side of the continent who found a way to amend their state constitution to try to alleviate some of the power grabs they're seeing from Democrats. But before we jump into that, supervising features editor Andrew J. Shawshaw, which is to make sure that you hold him distinct from any other supervising features editor named Andrew Shawshaw.
There are many.
Andrew,
it is a common name.
Andrew K. Shawshaw, not this guy. This is Andrew J. Or AJ, as we call him. He's going to
Stain.
He's here to talk. Oh, I didn't say you liked it. I just said we called you that. He's here to give us some details about what may sound surprising at first, that our own President Joseph Biden has thrown his support behind a fossil fuel pipeline. I'm not sure if it's natural gas or oil or both, but fossil fuels. Unfortunately, that's probably not what you think.
No, it is not. It is a natural gas pipeline. Unfortunately, however, it is the Nordstream 2 pipeline, which is a natural gas pipeline that's going to run from Russia to Germany to supply some EU natural gas. Now, this is a collaborative effort between some EU member states and the Russian and some Russian businesses as well. And so we're essentially seeing.
So Biden is collaborating with Putin, is what you're telling
exactly.
me.
Right? There is collusion going on between the Biden administration and the Russian government. Essentially, just Putin himself. So we got some reports in the last couple hours, or the last 24 to 48 hours, that Biden will be waiving sanctions on a company in charge of the Nord Stream 2. Now, essentially, what was discovered was that these folks, according to Axios, who one of the Russian-based businesses who is involved in generating this pipeline, they are involved in sanctionable activity. So the State Department is going to outright admit that these folks are up to sanctionable activity, the Nord Stream 2 AG, and they are going to say that their owner is up to nefarious activity as well, their owner and CEO. But due to some United States security interests and some national interests abroad, we're going to just go ahead and we're gonna green light this pipeline overseas. Of course, this comes just weeks after the Keystone XL pipeline was unceremoniously put to death by the Biden administration. Right. It was, of course, put to death under the Obama administration. It was revived under the Trump administration. And it was put back to death under the Biden administration.
Because there are no national security interests involved with supplying domestic interests with energy.
Apparently,
it's only international.
The U.S. apparently has no vested interest in being self-sufficient when it comes to energy.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a terrible idea to me.
If you'll recall that the Keystone XL pipeline, when it was put to death, there was a lot of talk about 11,000 jobs just kind of disappearing in the snap of fingers between this Canadian and American pipeline. Even more jobs in Canada, actually. But of course, these Russian jobs, completely fine. Apparently, we would like to put some Russians to work. They haven't been forced to work for most of their history.
Yeah, it's
either way
that the Biden administration has its priorities straight.
Helping the Russians out.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the argument here is that despite Biden's tough rhetoric on Russia throughout the campaign cycle last year, he wants to help out Angela Merkel. Wants to make sure that the Germans are getting their part of this deal. He doesn't want to impede. And so that raises quite a few questions here. First and foremost, though, what I wanted to talk about here is, does this cast the Russia alarmism under the Trump administration in a new light, George? Do you see that essentially we're going to start green lighting, friends of Putin for massive business deals? We're going to waive sanctions. Does this prove that this claim that we're back in a Cold War with Russia, does it make it ridiculous?
Well, it doesn't make it ridiculous. It was always ridiculous. This is further evidence of its ridiculousness. It is just, mainstream Democratic hypocrisy. That is all it is, pure and simple. When it was convenient to blame the Russians for anything that Trump was having success in, or anything that would in any event make Trump maybe look a little bit good, then the Russians were evil incarnate, and Trump was the next best thing. Putin's the Antichrist, but Trump is the beast. And as long as if that narrative suited the Democratic Party and the leftists who are really pulling the strings in the Democratic Party, then that was the narrative that they went with, and that their shills in the mainstream media went with. Now that that's not the case, they don't. Although listening to the Democrats talk, you'd think it still was the case. Donald Trump still occupies a huge amounts of real estate rent-free in their minds. But with him out of office, with him out of power, that narrative is less useful. So now, apparently, they find it more useful to greenlight this project, and the Russians have to be good guys in order for that to happen. Then so be it. It's weird to me that they would actually go ahead and admit these are sanctionable activities, but you know what? Ixnay on the anctions say we're not doing that. That is bizarre. Why they would go out of their way to say that, I don't know. But this administration does about 35 things a day, and I understand about 2 of them, and the other 33 just have me scratching my head. So. You tell me. But yeah, the whole narrative, the whole Russian narrative was always ridiculous. And this just, it undercuts any claim to credibility that narrative ever had.
Cameron, what do you think?
This is strange on 2 fronts. One, we already talked about the Russia front. Then there's also the climate change front. I know Blinken originally was like, we're going to stop this pipeline from being constructed. During his confirmation hearing back in January, the pipeline already, I think, has like 95% completion. So it's just kind of like this last little bit before Russia can essentially cut off Ukraine from their oil supply, because that's the main goal of this right now. Is they built that pipeline from Russia to Germany so that way they could cut off Ukraine, because Russia doesn't like Ukraine. And what's kind of strange about all of this is that the United States government really had power to assert that, hey, not only are we going to hold ourselves accountable on the foreign policy front, we're going to hold ourselves and other countries accountable on the climate change front as well. Mm-hmm. And what's weird is that how he is not applying the same rules to other countries that he is to the United States right now, especially because he gave such a supposed tough on Russia stance, where not only is he letting Russia get away with finishing this pipeline, he's letting them get away with something that is essentially setting back the climate change goals that Biden and a lot of these other globalist organizations have touted as well.
And ironically, this is exactly what conservatives have said all along about all of these international agreements on climate change, is that it's always going to result in the United States pulling its weight, doing better than pulling its weight in terms of innovation and ingenuity. And all of these other nations are going to not pull their weight. Of course, the globalists, folks like Biden, were saying that's not true. They're not going to eat our lunch. They're not going to cheat us.
Well,
and of course, he's going to help them cheat us. Apparently,
they have to say that. You have to remember that in the eyes of these people, the United States is the bad guy. Mm-hmm. The United States, even if you are an American citizen, if you are a globalist of the Biden-Obama ilk, then the United States is the antagonist in the story. And so it doesn't matter how bad this stuff hurts the U.S. or U.S. interests or the future of the U.S. or your children or grandchildren. None of that is relevant because you deserve it. You deserve to be hurt in their worldview because you're an American and Americans are evil. We're responsible for racism for the last 3,000 years of world history. It's all our fault. Never mind that we only existed for the last 10% of that time frame. Every world evil that ever existed lands at the feet of the U.S. of A. in this worldview. And so, I mean, it really isn't, it's hypocritical in that they try to claim that's not the case and do something else. It's not actually hypocritical to their worldview. That is what they believe. They think we're evil and need to be destroyed.
Now, what I want to forward back to you, Cameron, now is that on top of this, I mean, whether it is a purely political cynicism or not, is this essentially, does this prove kind of the danger that folks have been talking about? We've spoken before, and I think there's kind of an agreement at this table that, there are things that Trump brought to the table that were good, things that were iffy, things that we don't enjoy necessarily, but something that has definitely interested me is this talk about the threat of globalism. Does this essentially bring those dangers into perspective? The idea that, whether you agree with the dangers of climate change or not, whether or not you agree with Russia being the enemy, they're going to use a tie and an alliance with Germany as to get us in bed with Russia, with Russian companies, and with Russian natural gas production. I mean, is that a threat? Is that a problem?
At the risk of being called a neoconservative warmonger or whatever they're going to say, I think globalism, on some degree, is really important for us to have. But what I think the issue is that's kind of faded away once we've seen kind of the rise of other developed nations playing a role in globalism. Once we kind of got China involved, once we got Iran involved in kind of all of this, and Russia taking a bigger stance after the collapse of the Soviet Union, I think a big issue that we're having with globalism right now is that the United States is not doing a good job of holding these places accountable, because we keep having people who want too many friends, pretty much, where we're not willing to take a risk in a sense. And I'm saying that in a way where Trump's foreign policy, one of the reasons that it worked was that everyone was kind of constantly on the edge of their seat. He kind of had a mess around and find out kind of perspective on Russia, North Korea, and China, but it worked out in the end. And when you have people trying to play softball with these other countries, they're getting away with a lot. And we're kind of seeing the consequences of that now. I'm going to kind of get a little bit off topic, but I'm going to circle back to this, where you had one of the last things the Obama administration did was send tons of cash on a plane to Iran. And when you have that kind of treatment where you use United States money essentially as a pacifier to these other countries, not as a way to hold them accountable, you're going to get away with everything. And this pipeline is just one example of that.
There's a great short story called Flowers for Algernon. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. It was made into a film that I think was called Charlie, but don't hold me to that. The point of it is there's a guy who is, I don't even know what the word is anymore. He is intellectually disabled. I don't know what we call people with low functioning IQs anymore, but I know the word that I grew up using isn't allowed anymore, so I won't use it. But he's very, very, very slow. And he gets picked on. He has a job kind of as a janitor. He's an adult. He gets picked on, but he lets it happen because when it happens, people laugh, and he feels like he's everybody's friend when that happens. And it's really, the story opens up with a very sad scene of that occurring. Then he's part of an experiment. He's given drugs or an operation or something, I don't remember which, and he becomes a super genius, like the smartest guy on the planet. Like hit the counselors and therapists and who are all working with him get to the point where they can't even understand him anymore. He's that smart. And then the effect starts to go away. It's not permanent. They can't hold it. And the very last scene in the short story is, I have to leave this place. I'm going to go somewhere else where I can have lots of friends. and you just know he's going to let them do that to him again, and they're going to laugh at him, but he's going to think they're laughing with him. And that's what that story makes me think of the Biden administration. Like, they're so slow that they think these people are smiling with them, and they're not. They are laughing behind their backs at America's weakness, and it's sad. The story is tragic. It's one of my favorite short stories. I haven't read it in forever. I need to read it again. But it's tragic. It's one of the very few pieces that I've read, and I've just like I want to jump in the story and save this guy from himself, because it's so sad. But that's exactly what we're seeing with the Biden administration. They just go everywhere and they want to be friends with everyone, and it doesn't, they think that people are being friendly when no, that's, they're being diplomatic, and it's not the same thing. Which is just sad. It's sad. It's tragic. It's a tragedy for all of us, I think, which may be why some Americans looking at policies like that, but on a more local level or statewide level, are dissatisfied and want to move to somewhere that may be, they want to move to somewhere that is more amenable to their political philosophies, except they want to do that movement without actually moving, Cameron.
Yeah, so 5 more counties in Oregon just voted to essentially endorse the push to become Greater Idaho. And what this basically
if I were in Idaho now, I think I'd be insulted by that, right? Insulted. Like, what am I, regular Idaho? And you want to be? That doesn't seem. I feel like you could message that better, but.
So basically the reasoning behind this has to do with the fact that the policies that are happening in the state of Oregon right now are drastically different than what a lot of people that live in Oregon actually believe outside of the major cities of like Portland and Eugene and all these other cities that are more kind of on the western side of Oregon. And the reason and this is just kind of very telling in general about the direction of our country right now, where we're seeing a lot of people leave states like California, like New York, and they're going to Florida, Texas, Arizona, and going to all these different states to essentially be with people and live under policies that more align with their values. And that's exactly what's happening here. This region between Northern California and Oregon has been pushing sometimes to be their own state. There's the whole state of Jefferson movement. This is a little bit different. But this whole thing is just indicative of a larger trend happening across our political landscape, where people are choosing to separate rather than finding common ground. They're rather just deciding, let's just split. Or I'm just going to leave. So what I wanted to ask you guys about is this a trend you guys are also observing? And do you think it's something where, is it concerning, or is this something that is naturally bound to happen?
I'm definitely seeing it. I think, part of the draw of as a Boston native of moving to Arizona for this job was the fact that, I get to move away from some of these worldviews and ideas that are just incredibly well populated in the Northeast that I just can't seem to get along with. That I've grappled with them. I've tried to make the understanding approach, the civil approach, but it is just easier to pursue the path of least resistance generally, especially when we've seen politics start to take over every part of our lives. It is if you don't stop it somewhere, if you don't find an active effort to stop it, it will invade every part of our lives. It already has culturally. And so I think seeing that, we want to pursue the path of least resistance. When you start talking about secession, obviously, particularly with, when we start talking about, the Civil War is always brought up. Obviously, we're a little bit more concerned. That's concerning rhetoric.
Yep.
In these cases, I'm not necessarily, because let's backtrack. I would never suggest the Civil War split secession conversation that kind of gets brought up in the mainstream media all the time with Fox News and with MSNBC, with these folks who are like, maybe we should just have a great divorce. it doesn't work that way. There are blue cities and red states. There are red states next to blue states, surrounding blue states. It can't work that way. This kind of disassociation, however, I think it's not optimal. It may be the most civil solution that we have right now, given the fact that, it made the representative government system made a lot of sense when the country was young, because there was still the pre-modern, understanding of the world, of reality, of the way things worked. When you stop having not only politics in common, but fundamental understandings of the way the world works, the way the family works, the way that a human being works, there really isn't, how do you grapple with that level of dimension and difference? It's just not possible. So this is not optimal. I pray every day for the nation to become more united, but I think that given the way that things are right now, it might be the most civil way to go.
Yeah, you said, how do we grapple with that level of dimension? And I thought you were going to say dementia, which which would also be appropriate in a lot of these conversations, I think. It's something we're very aware of in Arizona. That phenomenon that you're talking about, Cameron, is probably why Joe Biden won the state, barring some sort of findings from this audit that's going on in Maricopa County right now that might, indicate something other than what we have seen, but haven't seen great information about that, at least to date. But
that audit, that I feel like every 5 seconds there's something new with that one.
Yeah, well, we really, this is the kind of thing where it's going to all be back and forth and back and forth. We really need to let it shake out and let the dust settle before we know what the real results are. But every day, and pretty much every day here in Phoenix, I see some bumper sticker or something that, it's something like, hey guys, don't California my Arizona, something along those lines. So California has become a verb out here, defined as moving something to the left. Now I'm with Andrew. I mean, at least I think I am. I think one thing I don't want to see happen. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often, so I say that hesitantly. I also don't like it, but. The last thing I think we all want to see is any sort of violence along these issues, some sort of new civil war, whatever. And I think we're a long way away from that. But I don't think it's anything anybody wants to see happen. And so anything short of that allows people to live in freedom and feel more comfortable with where they are and not feel threatened, not feel like their way of life is threatened or whatever. I support that. If that's Greater Idaho, if that's state of Jefferson, what I'm going to have trouble putting Idaho and Greater in the same sentence ever, I think. But whatever that might, sorry, Idahoans, whatever that might look like, short of exercising our right to bear arms and just declaring ourselves separatists, I think I would probably support. I also agree with Andrew. I think what we really need, though, is unity. We need to come together. But that is so difficult when you have an understanding of reality that on one side, and on the other side, you have essentially a disagreement with the idea that there can be an understanding of reality, or even that a reality exists. And that's really where we kind of are now. We have, people who say, well, this is the way it is, and so we need to be practical and live with the world the way this is. Like, there are two genders, for instance. That's pretty observable, by anybody, versus I don't care what you see, I identify as a 130-pound female supermodel. I forget what I know I look like a 53-year-old man. Forget about that. I am, especially because I'm only 52. Don't, that's not reality. Reality is whatever I say it is. Well, I'm not going to say there is no middle ground there, but whatever the middle ground between those two positions is, it's still crazy. Yeah. The middle ground between those positions is not acceptable to either side because, it's from anybody who looks at reality and deals with reality, the middle place between those two ideas is still insane. And this person over here is only will only accept that we completely agree with whatever they think reality is. So, and I realize that's more of I picked more of a cultural example than a political example there, but the premise is the same. So I would love to have civil discourse where we try to find compromises and middle ground there. I despair for our ability to do that, not because the right has become more extreme. Conservatives have always pretty much said the same thing: small government, traditional values, whatever. Those things have not really changed in any significant way. The progressives have gone nuts.
Yes.
And so the middle ground just goes farther and farther left as the other side goes farther and farther left, to the point where it's really hard to agree with anything. So
absolutely. And I don't want to derail us but to piggyback on that, I want unity short of unity based on a lie. I want unity at almost all costs, but it has to be around the right things. And I know that's what the other side is saying as well. But at the end of the day, you can't just continue ceding ground in the backslide for the sake of civility and kindness and unity. I want those things, but it can't be around just absolute nonsense.
Right. Which is what the left has turned into.
I would maybe add on to that in the sense where it's like the Democratic Party has gone so far extreme in maybe the past 20, 30 years, where I bet if you look at campaign ads from like elections in the past, you're going to find things in those Democratic campaign ads as a conservative and be like, oh, maybe that's someone that I would vote for at the time.
John F. Kennedy.
And
That's a fantastic example.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Cameron.
And what's crazy about this is I would maybe even disagree slightly in the sense of unity, because I think unity is important, but I think what needs to come first is civility.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you don't have any degree of civility, you can't have unity.
No.
And what's tough living here in California is people, like you were saying, people have such drastically different views of what reality actually is, where you could be having a conversation with somebody, or you could go to school with somebody, and the things that are coming out of their mouth, it sounds like a different language. Mm-hmm. Because the terms that they are using to describe certain political issues and cultural issues, it's a completely different dictionary that they're using. And it's a completely different worldview, to the point where your common ground might just be short of not wanting to kill each other. And that's a very, very concerning thing about the state of our country right now. So I would say when people talk about the Civil War and stuff, I don't think it really makes sense in the context of states of counties wanting to break off and kind of do their own thing. If you have people being like, we want to break off from the United States as a whole, I think that's when you're getting into a whole other issue. Yes. But what's tough is that you cannot have any sort of unity if you can't even have the base level of respect, where you're not viewing the other side as communist or fascist. And that's what we've become.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Andrew mentioned JFK. His tax policies the current Democratic Party of 2021 would stone him to death for his tax policies, and that was barely a generation ago. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Mm-hmm. Find me a Democrat who thinks that's good advice today. That it's not out there. It's all about what the country can do for you. That is the platform of the Democratic Party. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Cameron. For a man of such tender years, your wisdom far exceeds what I'd expect. And I should point out, we mentioned that he was our resident birthday boy today. Cameron is 18 years old today, which. Look, I'm just going to say, ladies, that's all I got to say.
His Twitter says he is looking. That's all I'm saying.
There you go. If you're interested in a guy who's really into reading and jogging, I think Cameron is. He's
that was my
He thinks that
all I do is write and go on walks. Like, I'm incredibly boring, but
he thinks I don't pay attention to his Twitter feed, but I pay a lot of attention to his Twitter feed.
That's good to know, George.
He's like, all right, going to be more careful on Twitter from now on.
Joe Sedian, one of our, he's been on the show many times. One of our deputy managing editors here, probably 2-3 times a week. He'll just say, "How do you know that?" And I just tell him, "I'm the editor in chief. We know everything. We know everything." All right. I don't want to give any more secrets away, but happy birthday, Cameron. In all seriousness.
Thank you.
So COVID-19, I'm not going to tell you guys anything you don't already know here. COVID-19 provided governors, mayors, local leaders with all kinds of opportunities to expand their power, right? Their influence over citizens. We saw these most egregiously happening, of course, in Democrat-controlled areas, states, and cities and counties. And Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf often came up as one of the worst offenders in that, right? So we've gone from the left coast all the way over to the other side of the continent to Pennsylvania. But this week, 2 constitutional amendments passed statewide referenda that provide the state's General Assembly with, quote, more power to block emergency declarations. I'm quoting here from a story in the Western Journal by our own contributor, Elizabeth Stauffer, or Stouffer. I'm not sure, Elizabeth, how you pronounce your last name. I should probably pronounce it like the lasagna, since I'm a fan.
Mac and cheese.
Yeah, I'm a fan, so we'll just go with Stouffer. She can correct me later if she wants. The amendment of the Pennsylvania Constitution grants the legislature the ability to terminate the governor's COVID-19 disaster emergency declarations without governor approval. So prior to the amendment, it worked pretty much like it works everywhere. The state House and the state Senate would have to pass measures, and then the government would have to sign them. Well, of course, anytime the Republican-controlled legislature tried to curb the Democratic governor's power grab, he vetoed it. And it was tough to get a 2/3 vote, to overcome the veto. With the passage of this resolution, a simple majority vote by the House and Senate is all that's necessary. So there is no veto power available to the governor any longer. Now, Democrats responded to this. I'm not sure who we were quoting with this, and even if I did know who it was, I don't know that I named them because it is such a stupid thing to say. The Democrat response was they were worried that the legislature would now act, quote, to cancel COVID-19 emergency declarations without considering public health or consulting with the governor's office. I'm sure that's what the Pennsylvania legislature is going to do. Public health? Never heard of it. Let's just do this thing over here. Governor Wolf? No. Who? I don't. No. Let's just do this thing anyway. It's an absolutely ridiculous, brainless statement. That's not how any politician on the planet has ever worked. It's so. I mean, that's the best complaint they had. That's their best argument. Yeah, we think the legislature wants to ignore public health. That's what we really think they want to do. Yeah. Okay. A couple of state Republican lawmakers, the Senate Majority Leader and Senate President, were forced to respond to that idiocy and did so much more measured terms than I would have. They said that this decision by the people is not about taking power away from any one branch of government. I don't know that I agree with that, but that's what they said. It's about reestablishing the balance of power between 3 equal branches of government as guaranteed by the Constitution. Now, Governor Wolf said that this is according to the Morning Call, that Republicans were injecting partisan politics into emergency disaster response in a, quote, thinly veiled power grab. And he warned that the provisions were a threat to a functioning society that must respond to increasingly complicated disasters. I don't know why they're increasingly complicated except by the tendrils of the ever enlarging state. But what do you think about that statement? Governor Wolf called these amendments a thinly veiled power grab by Republicans. Right or wrong, Cameron? Is that what this was?
Wrong, so wrong. It's if anything, the big lesson from this pandemic had nothing to do with public health.
No.
It had to do with how power hungry so many of these officials were. And right now we are coming out of this crisis. If anyone thinks that in the United States, with very few exceptions of certain local areas, we should no longer be in crisis mode. And if the governors are still treating this like they are in crisis mode, that is an immediate red flag that they are liking their power a little bit too much. We saw it here in California that until Gavin Newsom got threatened with a recall vote, oh, look at that. All of a sudden, things start opening up. French Laundry incident happens. All of a sudden, more things start opening up. When you, as an American citizen, don't hold your own people accountable, hold your own politicians accountable, they think they can get away with anything. And what this crisis has done is it's given them an excuse. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he's calling this a power grab by Republicans is such a dirty lie for him to try and spin this. And he knows at this point that there's almost nothing that he can do now. So his last thing is, let's just resort to partisan rhetoric on this.
Which is deeply embarrassing. I've never believed the psychobabble you're projecting argument, but I've actually never seen a real example until this moment where someone literally just said, I'm not doing that, you're doing that. That's what you're doing.
Right.
It's ridiculous. There's no question about it that these folks have, for the last year and a half, disregarded the science, made themselves the experts, these politicians who are not in the labs,
right?
And they use whatever data they can. It's the argument that always is made is that I can go on Google and I can look up, whatever I want, whatever side of any issue, and I can find the data to back me up. They pick the lab studies they want, and then they use that to extract whatever power they can. And it goes back to a conversation we had, George, a while ago on the show about these disaster declarations, where it's the executive has so much authority to take control and to start demanding that certain entities do as they ask because of these disaster declarations.
Which is totally fine on a very short-term basis.
Yes.
You need a strong executive for a very limited period of time. This is Alexander Hamilton argued this all the time because he saw the result of a war that was fought by the Continental Congress under the Articles of Confederation, which did not allow for a strong executive rule, and because of that, the American Revolution probably lasted a lot longer than it needed to. But you need, if there's an earthquake, you don't want to wait for the legislature to come into session and vote for something to take action, right? You need to move right now, and I get that. That's totally fine. But that should be like 4 days or a week or whatever. And then the legislature should come in and say, okay, that's good, that's great, we got this now. Here's the money, here's what we think needs to be done. At that point, the various branches of government should start to play the roles that they were elected to play. My favorite thing about this thinly veiled power grab by Republicans is that both these amendments were put in place by a yes vote of about 54%. About 38% of the electorate in Pennsylvania is Republican. So I don't know where those other 16% came from, but I would imagine, and I don't know this, I would imagine there was probably greater Republican turnout than Democratic in this primary election. So that would be part of it. But you can't call this a thinly veiled power grab by Republicans when it was the people of Pennsylvania
made the
who put this in place. You could call it, a Republican attempt, maybe when they put it on the ballot. You could at least make that argument.
The tinderbox.
Yeah, but once the people vote for it, it's a thinly veiled power grab by the people of Pennsylvania, from whom you derive all your power, Governor Wolf. So, give me a break. I'm going to have to talk to K-Kunk, our producer, our fine producer of WJ Live, and maybe just get rid of this chair and give me a soapbox to stand on, because I think every time I'm on this show, I end up standing on my soapbox anyway. So. All right, guys, last question from me. What do you think of this response to overreach by state governors? Was this the right thing to do? Is it going to be effective? Would you like to see other states following this example and doing something similar. Andrew.
Oh, cheer. I cheer. I saw this go. You guys won't believe it at home, but when this topic went in the chat before the show, I jumped out of my seat and I applauded it. Because I am
so it's twice you and I have agreed on something today. All right.
I am an institutionalist at heart. The institution is that there is a balance of powers. Those three bodies were made to correct the institution, and this is what's necessary.
Cameron?
Well, what's kind of hilarious about all this is that Democrats have taken on this kind of self-righteous role as the protectors of democracy after the whole election nonsense stuff. So I think what's so crazy is how they claim that they're the protectors of democracy, yet don't even care enough about the interests of their own people until they threaten to get them out of power. Honestly, I think Pennsylvania, glad that they did this. I don't really know what protections state of New York has in place. I feel like Cuomo kind of pops in and out of the news cycle now. Remember when we almost got him to resign, and we didn't. He was never going to, but we got there. We got there.
Conversations,
but just the fact that we got so much attention on him for like that solid week, that was a good week for America. But I just think that there needed to be in the future, this should never happen again. And protections need to be taken on the state legislature level to ensure that governors do not have this extent of emergency power like this.
Amen. All right. That's about all the time. In fact, it's probably a little more than of the time than we had allotted for today. But thank you for joining us today on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. You know, the Western Journal exists to equip readers with the truth, and you can go there today and subscribe. You can become a part of the fight for the truth. There is a rampant fake news media out there. I don't have to tell you that. Western Journal exists to counter those false narratives. You can go to westernjournal.com/join. It's right there on your screen. And for less than $5 a month, you can become a member. Sorry, I'm trying to get away from the subscribe term, because you can also subscribe to newsletters, which you should do, and that's free, and you should do all of that. But what we really want you to do is become a member. You can do that at westernjournal.com/join. Less than $5 a month. You get an ad-free or ad-light. There are a few ads that we don't control, that we can't quite keep out of the whole experience, but it's almost ad-free reading experience. You get the truth, and most importantly, you get to support us in what we're doing to try to bring truth to millions of Americans every day, every month, every year here at the Western Journal. Thank you for joining us on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal today. We're here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. We'll be here again next week at those times. We look forward to seeing you then. Cameron, once more, happy birthday, young man. Don't get in too much trouble this weekend. Andrew, thanks for being with us again, as usual, and we'll see you all next week. Take care. Stay safe.
Hey, guys. Huge story. We need a fresh card. Let's red label it. Roll as fast as we can.
All right, on it. Sounds good. All right, guys, we got a red label breaking story. Can we get a picture for that? And can we try to get that out in the next 20 minutes? I want eyes on it as soon as possible.
On it, Joe. 2 more minutes and we'll be live.
Story, so figure out what you want to bump. Ashley, we're going to want to translate it into Spanish yesterday.
Sí, señor. We can slide it in at 2:30. It should be going out here in about 10 minutes.